More than 2.8 million Americans died in 2014. Fewer than 4,000 had a net worth of over $8 million when they passed away. Ronald Read was one of them. When Read died, he left $2 million to his stepkids and more than $6 million to his local hospital and library. What's interesting enough about Read's story is that he was neither a businessman or a C-suite executive. Ronald Read fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years and swept floors at JCPenney's for 17 years. So how did he manage to build such an enormous wealth with a small income? The book, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, reveals many such secrets of personal mastery. Doing well with money or life in general isn't just about what you know. It's about how you think about money, wealth, or success, and most importantly, how you behave. The Psychology of Money delves into how our own mindset and thinking determines our wealth, happiness, and success, and how our psychological flaws and biases keep us away from them. Chapter 1. No one's crazy. Everyone has their own unique experience with how the world works, and what you've experienced is more compelling than what you learned secondhand. Our money decisions are influenced by the former rather than the latter. In 2006, two economists from the National Bureau of Economic Research dug through 50 years of consumer finance surveys. In theory, people should make investment decisions based on their goals and the investment options available to them at the time. But that's not what most people do. The economists found that people's lifetime investment decisions are heavily influenced by their own experiences, especially experiences in their early adult life. Individual investors' willingness to bear risks depends on their personal history. So all of us, you and me, develop views on money which vary wildly from person to person. What seems crazy to one might make perfect sense to another person. If you grew up when inflation was high, you're more likely to invest in bonds. If you grew up when there was a bull run in the stock market, your portfolio is likely to contain more stocks than bonds, and so on and so forth. Being aware of where our personal views on money come from can help us correct our hidden psychological biases. Chapter 2. Luck and Risk. Luck determines success more often than we recognize. In 1968, there was roughly 303 million high school-age people in the world. About 18 million of them lived in the United States. About 270,000 of them lived in Washington State. A little over 100,000 of them lived in the Seattle area. And only about 300 of them attended Lakeside High School. The Lakeside School in Seattle, which Bill Gates attended, was one of the very few high schools in the United States that had a computer back in 1968. Most university graduate schools did not have a computer anywhere near as advanced as Bill Gates had access to in his 8th grade. And he couldn't get enough of it. The rest was history. Microsoft is now over a $3 trillion company. Bill Gates told the school's graduating class in 2005, if there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. Outcomes in life and investing are often influenced more by chance than by skill or risk-taking capabilities. Recognizing this can help us have a more realistic view of success. Chapter 3. Never Enough. Rajat Gupta was born in Kolkata and orphaned as a teenager. By his mid-40s, Gupta was CEO of McKinsey, the world's most prestigious consulting firm. He retired in 2007 to take on the roles with the United Nations and World Economic Forum. By 2008, Gupta was reportedly worth over $100 million. It is a large sum of money to most. A 5% annual return on that much money generates about $600 an hour, 24 hours a day. From the slums of India, Gupta had quite literally become one of the most successful businessmen alive. But by all accounts, he wasn't satisfied just by being a mere centimillionaire. Gupta wanted to be a billionaire. He wanted it badly. In October of 2011, Gupta was arrested by the FBI on charges of insider trading. The next year, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison, an additional year on supervised release, and ordered to pay $5 million in fines. To make money he didn't need, Gupta risked everything he had and needed. And that's just foolish. The best shot at keeping things you have is knowing when it's time to stop taking risks that might harm you. Knowing when you have enough. Chapter 4. Confounding Compounding. As of October 2024, Warren Buffett is the 9th richest individual on Earth, with a net worth of approximately $144 billion. However, Buffett was not even a billionaire until he turned 56. 99% of his entire wealth came after crossing 50 years of age, even though Buffett bought his first stock when he was just 11 years old. Warren Buffett is a phenomenal investor, but you miss a key point if you attach all of his success to investing judgment. The real key to his success is that he's been a phenomenal investor for 3/4 of a century. If he had started investing in his 30s and retired in his 60s, few people would have ever heard of him. His skill is investing, but his secret is time. That's how compounding works. Good investing isn't necessarily about earning the highest returns. The highest returns tend to be one-off hits that cannot be replaced. It's about earning pretty good returns that you can stick with and that can be repeated for the longest period. That is when compounding runs wild. Chapter 5. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. Jesse Livermore was the greatest stock market trader of his day. Born in 1877, he became a professional trader before most people knew that could even be a formal profession. By the age of 30, Livermore was worth the inflation-adjusted equivalent of over $100 million. By 1929, Jesse Livermore was already one of the most well-known investors in the world. The stock market crash that year cemented his legacy in history. In one day, Jesse made the equivalent of more than $3 billion. However, after his 1929 blowout, Livermore, overflowing with confidence, made larger and larger bets. He wound up far over his head in increasing amounts of debt, and eventually he lost everything in the stock market. He took his own life in 1940. There are a million ways to get wealthy and plenty of books on how to do so, but there's only one way to stay wealthy: some combination of frugality and paranoia. Getting money and keeping money are two very different skills. The first one requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting ourselves out there. But keeping money requires the opposite of taking risks. It requires humility, and fear of what we have earned can be lost just as fast if we are careless. It requires frugality and an acceptance that at least some of what you've made isn't attributable to luck. So past success cannot be relied upon to repeat indefinitely. Chapter 6. Tails You Win. While accepting a Screen Actors Guild award, Brad Pitt said,
"I've been banging away at this thing for 30 years. I think the simple math is some projects work and some don't, and there's no reason to belabor either one. Just get on to the next."
Failure is normal, and when we don't accept the simple fact, we tend to overreact to failures. We can build a great future even if we fail more than 50% of the time. One or two major wins can more than compensate for tens of thousands of losses. Less than 4% of all the stocks ever traded in the United States made all of the money, while a majority of them led to loss. Walt Disney's first studio went bankrupt. His films were expensive to produce and finance at outrageous terms. By the mid-1930s, Disney had produced more than 400 cartoons. Most of them were short. Most of them were beloved by viewers, and most of them lost a fortune. All until Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs changed everything. The $8 million it earned in the first 6 months of 1938 was higher than anything the company had earned previously. It transformed Disney Studios. All company debts were paid off. Key employees got retention bonuses. The company purchased a new state-of-the-art studio in Burbank, where it remains today. An Oscar turned Walt from famous to a full-blown celebrity. By 1938, he had produced several hundred hours of films. But in business terms, the 83 minutes of Snow White were all that mattered. Most tremendous results often stem from tail events. Those rare occurrences that can change everything. When you accept that tails drive everything in business, investing, and finance, you realize that it is normal for lots of things to go wrong, break, fail, and fail again. Chapter 7: Freedom. Psychologist Angus Campbell, in his 1981 book, The Sense of Well-Being in America, pointed out that people are generally happier than many assume. But some people tend to be happier than others. You couldn't necessarily group them by income, geography, or education because so many people in each of those categories end up chronically unhappy. Campbell summed it up to a powerful common denominator of happiness. It was a strong sense of control over one's life. People often want to become wealthier to make them happier. Happiness, however, is a complicated subject because everybody's different. But if there's a common theme about happiness, a universal feel of joy, it's that people want to exercise control over their lives. More than your salary, more than the size of your house, or more than the prestige of your job. Control over doing what you want, when you want to, with the people you want, is the broadest lifestyle variation that makes people happy. The ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want, is priceless. It is the highest dividend money pays. Freedom is truly the ability to wake up every morning and say, I can do whatever I want today. Money's greatest intrinsic value. Chapter 8: Man in the Car Paradox. People tend to desire wealth to signal to others that they are powerful and should be admired. But in reality, those other people often bypass admiring you. Not because they don't think wealth is admirable, but because they use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desire to be liked and admired. When you see someone driving a nice car, you rarely think, wow, the guy driving that car is cool. Instead, you think, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool. Subconscious or not, this is how people think. People aspire to be respected and admired by others, but using money to buy fancy things may bring less of it than we imagine. If respect and admiration are your goals, be careful how you seek them. Humility, kindness, and empathy will bring you more respect than horsepower ever will. Chapter 9: Wealth is what you don't see. Money has many ironies. Here's the most important one. Wealth is what you don't see. If you see a Ferrari driving around, you may assume that the owner must be wealthy. But when you get to know some of these people up close, you will observe that many of them have spent a huge percentage of their pay on a car. Spending money to show people how much money you have is the fastest way to have less money. Rihanna nearly went bankrupt after overspending and sued her financial advisor. The advisor responded, was it really necessary to tell her that if you spend money on things, you'll end up with the things and not the money? When most people say they want to become a millionaire, what they actually mean is, I'd like to spend $1 million. And that is the exact opposite of being a millionaire. Not many people who spend like a millionaire are going to stay millionaires for long. Someone driving a $100,000 car may or may not be wealthy. Looking just at the car, all you know is that they have $100,000 less than they did before purchasing it. Or probably they are $100,000 more into debt. That's all you know about them. We tend to judge wealth by what we see because that's the information we have in front of us. We can't see people's bank accounts or brokerage statements. Fake it until you make it is the mantra of modern capitalism. But the truth is that wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is those swanky cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, and the expensive watches not worn. Wealth is the option not yet taken to buy something later. Real wealth offers you options, flexibility, and freedom to choose at the right time. Chapter 10: Save Money. In the 1970s, the world looked like it was running out of oil. The calculation was not hard. The global economy was consuming a lot of oil to grow. and the amount of oil we could drill just couldn't keep up. Well, we are yet to run out of oil, and this isn't because we found more oil or even got better taking it out of the ground. It's because we started building more efficient cars, factories, and homes. The United States now uses 60% less energy per dollar of GDP today than it did in 1950. The average miles per gallon of all vehicles on the road has doubled since 1975. The world grew its energy wealth not by increasing the energy it had, but by becoming more energy efficient. The important thing here is that finding more energy is largely out of our control, but we can control our energy expenditure by being more efficient. The same thing applies to money too. Saving is one of the very few things you can control, but it's also one of the few things that actually matter. So isn't that wonderful? The first idea, simple but easy to overlook, is that building wealth has little to do with your income or investment returns and lots to do with your savings rate. A high savings rate means having lower expenses, and having lower expenses means your savings can go further than they would if you spent more. Most importantly, you don't need a specific reason to save. Some people save money for a down payment on a house, a car, or retirement, and that's great. However, saving does not require a goal of purchasing something specific. You can save just for saving's sake. And indeed, you should. Everybody should. Chapter 11. Reasonable over rational. When making financial decisions, we often lean too heavily on rationality. But people are not spreadsheets. We are human beings, driven by emotions, sentiments, and psychological biases. Financial analysts dove themselves to finding mathematically optimal investment strategies, but those optimal strategies on Excel spreadsheets hardly work for common investors who might lose sleep when the market is down by 10%. The common investor wants a strategy that maximizes how well they sleep at night. In the words of Morgan Housel, do not aim to be coldly rational when making financial decisions. Aim to be pretty reasonable. Reasonable is more realistic, and when you have a better chance at sticking with it for the long run, this is what matters most when managing money. Being reasonable often works better than being cold and rational. Even a stock portfolio that may have historically performed better than a 70-30 stock bond portfolio, the former can make you lose sleep when the market declines. Having some bonds may generate more stable returns in lean years and give you much needed peace of mind. The former is rational, the latter is reasonable. Chapter 12. Surprise. When we think of risk or how bad things can get, we look at past events. So, how bad can a war become? We have had World War II for reference. An estimated 75 million people died in that war. That was roughly 3% of the world's population at the time. Can things get any worse? Yes, they can. There's no guarantee that a future war will not get any worse. The pandemic came as a surprise to even the most sophisticated healthcare systems in the world, because we did not have any other event to reference in the past. History is mostly the study of surprising events. However, it is often used by investors and economists as a guide to the future. Do you see the irony? Things that have never happened before happen all the time. It is smart to have a deep appreciation for economic and investing history. History helps us calibrate our expectations, study where people tend to go wrong, and offers a rough guide on what tends to work. But it is not in any way a map for the future. The most important events in historical data are the big outliers and the record-breaking events. They are what moved the needle in the economy and the stock market. The Great Depression, World War II, the dot-com bubble, September 11th, the housing crash of the mid-2000s. A handful of outlier events play an enormous role because they influence so many unrelated events in their wake. Learn from history, but expect surprises. Chapter 13. Room for Error. The Battle of Stalingrad during World War II was the largest in history. When tanks were desperately needed on the front lines, something happened to a German tank unit that surprised everyone. Almost none of the tanks worked. Out of the 104 tanks in the unit, Fewer than 20 were operable. Engineers quickly found the issue. During the weeks of inactivity behind the front lines, field mice had nestled inside the vehicles and eaten away the insulation covering the electrical systems. The Germans had the most sophisticated equipment in the world, yet they were defeated by mere mice. We love to plan and we love to forecast, and we often fail to assume that our plans and forecasts can completely fall flat on their faces. In fact, the most important part of every plan is planning on your plan not going according to plan. Harvard psychologist Max Bazerman once observed an interesting phenomenon. When analyzing other people's home renovations, most people estimate the project will run between 25 and 50% over budget. But when it comes to their own projects, people estimate that renovations will be completed on time and on budget. That's optimism bias, and that's just foolish. This is more true in the case of investing. Nothing in investing is guaranteed. The idea that you have to take risks to get ahead, but no risk that can wipe you out is ever worth taking. Even the most lucrative investment options can lead to gigantic losses, no matter how confident you are about certain chart patterns or technical setups. You always need to plan for failures, plan for errors, and have a margin of safety. Chapter 14. You'll change. According to the US Fed, only 27% of college grads have a job related to their major. That means more than 7 in 10 people eventually change their profession to something that has nothing to do with their college degree. Over time, we change, so do our preferences, life goals, priorities, and career choices. Every 5-year-old boy wants to drive a tractor when they grow up. Few jobs look better in the eyes of a young boy whose idea of a good job begins and ends with vroom vroom, beep beep, big tractor, here I come. Then many grow up and realize that driving a tractor may not be the best career. Maybe they want something more prestigious or lucrative. So as a teenager, they dream of being a lawyer. Now they think they know their plan is set, law school and its costs. Here we go. Then as a lawyer, they face such long working hours that they rarely get to see their families. So perhaps they take a lower paying job with flexible hours. Then they realize that childcare is expensive and consumes most of their paycheck, so they opt to be a stay-at-home parent. This, they conclude, is finally the right choice. Then at the age of 70, they realize that a lifetime of staying home means that they're unprepared to afford retirement. Long-term financial planning is essential, but things change, both the world around you and your own goals and desires. It is one thing to say, we don't know what the future holds. It's another to admit that, to yourself, you don't know what will happen or what even happen in the future. And the truth is, few of us do. It's hard to make enduring long-term decisions when your view of what you want in the future is likely to shift. Chapter 15. Nothing's free. The S&P 500 increased 119-fold in the 50 years ending in 2018. All you had to do was sit back and let your money compound. But of course, successful investing looks easy when you're not the one doing it. Hold stocks for the long run, you hear. It's good advice, but do you know how hard it is maintaining a long-term outlook when stocks are collapsing? Like everything else worthwhile, successful investing demands a price. But its currency is not dollars and cents. It's volatility, fear, doubt, and uncertainty, all of which are easy to overlook until you're dealing with them in real time. The key to a lot of financial decisions is just figuring out what the price is and being willing to pay it. The problem is that the price of a lot of things is not obvious until you've experienced them firsthand when the bill is overdue. The inability to recognize that investing has a price can tempt us to try to get something for nothing. Chapter 16. You and me. Ask yourself, how much are you willing to pay for Google stock today? The answer depends on who you are. If you have a 30-year time horizon, you can calculate the right price based on Google's discounted cash flows over the next 30 years. Now let's imagine you're looking to cash out within the next 10 years. In that case, you can figure out the price by analyzing Google's earning potentials in the next decade. Are you looking of selling within a year? Then pay attention to Google's current product sales cycles and whether we'll have a bear market. Are you a day trader? then the smart price to pay is who cares, because you're just trying to squeeze a few bucks out before whatever happens between now and lunchtime, which can be accomplished at any price. When investors have different goals and time horizons, prices that look ridiculous to one person can make sense to another. This is because the factors that investors pay attention to are different. Everyone is trying to play a different game. Different games have different rules. Before following people or listening to advice, know the game that they're playing. If you're not playing by the same game as them, play your game by different rules. Chapter 17, The Seduction of Pessimism. A famous historian once said, "For reasons I have never understood, people like to hear that the world is going to hell." For quite some time, a selection of economists and investment experts have been foretelling a recession. Every time they are proven wrong, they simply extend their time horizon but stick to their doomsday warnings. Bad news always sells. Optimism is the best bet for most people because the world tends to get better for the most part, most of the time. But for strange reasons, pessimism catches our attention more. It has a seductive power. This is why pessimism is just more common than optimism. It also sounds smarter. It's intellectually captivating and it's paid more attention to than optimism, which is often viewed as being oblivious to risk. Tell somebody that everything will be great and they're likely to either shrug you off or just give you the side eye. Tell somebody they're in danger and you will have their undivided attention. If a smart person tells you that they have a stock pick that they're going to rise tenfold in the next year, you may immediately write them off as full of nonsense. But if the same person tells you that a stock you own is about to collapse because there's an accounting fraud in the company, you're probably going to clear your calendar and listen to their every word. This is why we remember more about past market crashes like the crash of 1929, but forget some of the longest bull runs. We are wired to be seduced by pessimism, especially when it comes to money. Chapter 18, When You'll Believe Everything. In the documentary, How to Live Forever, a centenarian was asked, "What was the happiest day of your life?" "Armistice Day," she said, referring to the 1918 agreement that ended World War I. "Why?" the producer asked. "Because we knew there would be no more wars ever," she replied. World War II began 21 years later, killing more than 75 million people. There are many things in life that we think are true just because we desperately want them to be true. The author calls these things appealing fiction. They have a big impact on how we think about money, particularly investments and the economy. Why do people listen to TV investment commentary that has little track record of success? Partly because the stakes are so high in investing. Get a few stock picks right and you can become rich without much effort. There's a 1% chance that someone's prediction will come true, and it coming true will change your life. It's not crazy to pay attention, just in case. We tend to believe in some predictions because we desperately want them to be true. Do you believe in something just because you want it to be true? While the book is named The Psychology of Money, its timeless wisdoms go beyond managing money and building wealth. It touches all areas of life, living, and happiness. It doesn't lead us into the crowded alley of mindless money chasing. This is because, in most things in life, being reasonable is more important than being cold and rational. The author says, no matter how we save or invest, I'm sure we'll always have the goal of independence and will always do whatever maximizes for sleeping well at night.